So let's get started with using Defold. So this is what the system looks like when you first open it. And you can see we've got importing existing projects, creating new projects, asset libraries, everything that we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to give my project a name. So I'm going to call it Animal Platformer. I'm going to browse to where I actually want my system to be, which is on my A drive. We'll put it into the games folder and we will select that. I then have options for how it's going to be rendered onto the screen. So I've got Forward Plus, Mobile, and I've got Compatibility. Now Forward Plus only supports desktop platforms, and it's mainly for 3D graphics. For us, because we're making a 2D game, we can use Forward Plus if we want to, but it's not going to be the end of the world if we don't. If we go to mobile, it supports desktop and mobile platforms. Compatibility does desktop, mobile, and web, with the least advanced 3D graphics. I'm going to stick with compatibility just because I'm doing a 2D game, and it gives me the most flexibility of where I can put my game after. So I'm going to click create, and it will build that up, and after a very quick moment we will be able to have our project load up. And here we go, here's the editor. Now it looks very, very complicated, and it does look very vast for what it is. So you can see here we've got a bit of a 3D background here. This is what we call our scene view, and we've got a X and a Y axis, and we've got our Z axis. Sorry, looking at the graphic, X, Y, Z. Because we're going to be doing 2D, I'm going to click on 2D at the top, and it gives me a better view of what I'm looking at. We've got our node structure here, which we're going to talk about in a moment. The file system, got an inspector, and everything else that we need. This lightly blue outline here that's around the edge, this is the size of our window. And if you want to change any of those settings, you can go into project and project settings, and you'll be able to change them yourself. Okay. We're not going to worry about it right now. We will talk about it, but we are going to look at something else for now. What I am going to do is I'm going to add some assets to my file system. Now I've built some assets for you that I've used from another creator, which will be credited in the video description. And I'm just going to add this as an assets folder to my file system. So I've already copied them. So what I'm going to do is let me just quickly go to my project folder, and what I can do here is, because I've already got them copied, I can right click and paste, and that folder will start copying across. Hopefully it'll be very quick. There we are. And if I minimize that back down, we can see that Godot is importing them in for me, putting them into the system, and there they are. So everything that I need is in here, including tile sets, sprite sheets, everything that I need. I've got different gems, I've got characters, all the stuff organised into a very simple assets folder, which is always a good idea. What I'm also going to do is I'm just going to add a few other folders just to help me for when I'm organising my game later on. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder Scenes, which are reusable components that I use within my game, and I'm going to put all the scenes in one place, so that will make life a bit easier for me later on. I'm also going to create another folder, and I'm going to call this one Scripts, which obviously is where I'm going to put all the scripts that I'm going to write that that my game's going to use, and I'm going to pop it in there. So let's start with our first 2D scene. Now, like we said, we've got all these nodes at the top, and every scene is made up of a tree of nodes. And the first thing that we've got to do is pick a root node, so where the tree begins. And if I go into other nodes, we can see there's absolutely loads of them here. You've got node 2D, node 3D, animation players, and we're not going to be using anything from the node 3D space, but if I go into node 2D, you can see there's absolutely loads. Luckily, we've got a very nifty search box at the top, which will be very helpful to us later on. So, just for now, I'm going to click on 2D scene, and I'm going to rename my 2D scene, and I'm going to call it menu. And this is just going to be when the game first opens up, a menu is going to show. Very, very simple, and it's going to look and behave in a very simple manner. So, for example, we've got our root node here. So we're now going to right click and we're going to add a child, because we want to add more nodes to the root. If you think about an actual tree in real life, it will have the roots at the bottom, and then everything, branches and leaves, will grow from the root. And that's exactly what child nodes do. So I'm going to add a child node here, and I'm going to ask for a label, and I'm going to put in, I'm just going to type in label there, and you can see the node shows up. It shows me exactly what happens. So control for display in plain text. So if I click create, it will pop my label in, and you can see we've now got a blank box on our screen. So the text I'm going to put in for my label, I'm just going to put the name of the game, so I'm going to call it Animal Platformer. You guys might have come up with a lot jazzier names, which is more than fine. And now we're just going to do some other things to it. So if we look at the horizontal line, we can say center, so then it's center aligned. Vertical alignment, we can also go with, we'll stay with the top there. Other things we can do, we can go to layout, and it shows us all these different things that we can change. So for example, I could change the position of the x-axis, and we've got it looks like our scene is around 1150 pixels. So we can do some maths and type that in there, or we can very easily click and drag, and we can move it to where we find the middle there. We can change the size, and you can fiddle around with these settings and see what works for you. But for me, I'm just going to keep it like this for now, and we can change it later on as we want to. The other thing that I'm going to add, I'm going to add another child node to my menu, and I'm going to add 2 buttons. Now you can see there's lots of different buttons here. We're just going to go with a bog standard button. So a themed button that can contain text and an icon. So I'm going to create that. See, it shows up in the top left again. And I'm going to make 2 buttons. I'm going to make one called play. So this is going to start the game for me. So if I move that roughly into the middle, I can make that button a bit bigger. So there we go. And I'll add another child node, and I'm going to add another button. That's going to be called quit, so that we can exit the game. So let's make that a little bit bigger. I could have copied and pasted the other button, but I'm just going to judge it by eye. I'm only doing some rough work here. We can always go back and fix it later on, as you see fit with your game. So I've now got my 2 buttons. Now the downside is we need to think about how our programs can be maintainable. And so far we've got our nodes called label, button and button 2. The label is kind of fine to stay as the word label, because we're not going to be, there's no other labels on this screen, so that's fine. Our buttons, on the other hand, button and button 2 are not very good naming conventions, and if someone else was to modify our game, it can start to get a little bit confusing with what is being shown. So I'm going to rename my first button. I'm going to call this one, I'm going to call this play button. And I'm going to call the other one quit button. So they're renamed for me later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my scene. So Control S to save. I'm going to put it into my scenes folder, and it's already called it menu, so that will do for me. I'll click save there, and you can see now in my file explorer I've got my menu scene. So let's give it a try. If I press the play button at the top, and it says no main scene has been defined. What are we going to use? So I'm just going to say select current, which is the menu scene. It's the only scene I've got. So we'll select that, and the game starts, and it looks like this. Wow, how exciting. So you can see nothing really happens. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at making them do something. Let's see if we can start controlling the game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my menu root node here at the top. And what I want to do is I want to add a script. Scripts are the code that we use to control the game. So if with my menu node selected, I'm going to click on attach a new or an existing script to the selected node. And you can see that we're using the language GD scripts here. It's very Python-esque, very simple to Python. If you've never used GD script before, there is lots of documentation online, especially with the Godot documentation, which I would always recommend reading. If we look at templates, there's some templates that we can use there. You can choose not to use a template at all. I'm going to use the node default because it will give me a few things for me to get started. And it tells me where it's going to save it. Now I don't want to save it in my scenes folder, so I'm just going to click on this folder here. I'm going to go up one, and I'm going to go into my scripts folder. It's called it menu, that's fine for me. Click open and create. And you can see that the middle window has now changed again. And this shows us our script view. And you can always switch between the views at the top. So we've got 2D, scripts, asset library. The game is where the game actually runs. We've got the 3D space from before. So I'm going to jump into scripts. And it's given me a few functions to start off with. So the first function here says ready. And it says this is called when the node enters the scene tree for the first time. So when the scene is first loaded, this function is triggered, okay? And any code that we put in there will happen. The other bit is our process, and this happens every single frame, okay? So every frame of our game, this function is called. Now, because ours is mainly just a menu screen and nothing's really going to be happening there, I am going to get rid of those functions, so because it's not going to be helpful to me right now. I am going to keep line 1 that says extends node 2D. So node 2D means any methods that that any node 2D can access, my script can access, which is really, really helpful, and we'll see how that works a little bit later on. But what we want to do is we want to make our script aware for when our buttons are pressed. So we'll start with the quit button. So I'm going to click that on the left hand side, and we had a look at the inspector before with how we can change the properties. Well, this time up at the top we've also got a node section, and this shows us all the signals that can be passed for when this button is interacted with. So we can say when the button is being held down, when the button's been held, when it's been released, when it's been pressed, toggled, when it's been drawn. There's all sorts. Well, we're going to start with our quit button because it's going to be the easiest. And we're just going to say when it's pressed. So I'm going to double click that. And you can see from signal pressed. And it's building the method for us on quit button pressed. And it's saying where do you want to connect it. And you can see that my menu is highlighted. And that is how I want that connected. So I'll click connect. And you can see in my script a new function shows up and it says func on quit button pressed, and it says pass, which means that for now nothing will happen. So what I am going to do is I'm going to remove that code and I'm going to make it quit the game. And to do that I'm going to put get tree, and you can see that as I'm typing, this is what we call autocomplete or IntelliSense. I'm going to go to get tree. So what this means is it will find the tree of nodes that are currently loaded, and then I'm going to give it a command by saying dot. So once you've got the tree, do this command. I'm going to say quit. I'm going to give it an exit code of 0 so that it quits nicely. So Control S to save. So it saves my scene with my script. And now we can test it. So let's press the run button. As you see, my game is starting. The play button still does nothing. We've not done anything with that. If I go to my quit button and I press it now, the game quits because it's got the tree and it's quitted out of it. So that's how that works. Let's get the play button working, but to do that we are going to need another scene. So up here I can add a new scene with this plus button here. I'm going to choose a root node, which is just going to be a 2D scene again. And this time I'm going to call it game, because this is going to control the entire game in that scene. I'll flick back to the 2D scene, and we can see that it has opened up this view again, which is really helpful for us. And this is where all our levels are going to be. It's where we're going to see characters. Anything that the game is running, we will see here. So just for now, I'm just going to right click on game, add a child node, and I will just put in a placeholder label for now, just to show how this works. And I'll go to inspector, and I will change the text just very quickly to say, this is the game scene. Nothing exciting, just something to help us later on. We'll give that a save. We're back into our scenes folder. It's giving it the name scene. We'll press save there. And now, if we go back to our menu, you can see we've got our buttons again. We're going to go back to our play button there. Node. We will double click the pressed signal. And we're going to connect it back to our menu script, so that's highlighted. And on play button pressed, I'm going to click connect. Okay, so we've come back into our script view. You can see it's made another function very, very similar to our quit button. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do something very similar. I'm going to say get tree, because what we're going to do now is we're going to change the tree that is currently loaded. So we've currently got our menu tree loaded, and now we're going to say set scene. Oh, not set scene. We'll go to change. There we go. Change scene to file. Sometimes we do forget things, and it's always wise just to try different things, see what shows up. Change scene to file, and now when I put in some speech marks, it gives me all the scenes that I have made. So I want it to change to the game screen, so it pops it there. Let's give it a test. So we'll press Ctrl S to save. We'll press our play button, and now game is starting up. Our quit button still quits. When we press our play button, it then jumps to our game scene, so our game can now fully run. Okay, which is brilliant. So let's close that out. we'll make sure that our quit button still works, just so that adding new code hasn't broken what we've already had. It does. So now that we've commented our code, we've got our menu system, we've started off our game scene. What we're going to do next is we're going to start building our background, we're going to build our character, and we're going to build a very simple level, and we can add that to our game scene, and we'll start things starting to slowly come together. But just for now, in that small snippet, that is where we are. So have a go, see what you can make, and we'll move on in the next one.